The sun was bleeding into the scrubland when she came limping out of the mesquite, a jaguar, her coat streaked with mud and blood. Between her jaws, a limp cub, barely breathing. At the edge of an abandoned ranger station, Jonas Whitaker froze, socket wrench still in hand. She didn't growl, she simply stared, like she was asking for something no animal ever should. Jonas Whitaker hadn't spoken to another human in over 3 weeks. Not since the last delivery truck passed through the ranger station, bringing rusted parts and dented cans. He didn't mind the quiet. It was safer than the noise of people. Safer than what the world had taken from him. Born to a cleaning woman who worked night shifts at the high school, Jonas grew up watching her scrub other people's messes while dreaming of fixing things no one noticed. Now in this forgotten place near the Gila foothills, he kept his hands busy with old radios and broken chainsaws, anything that didn't bleed or ask questions. But lately, something had changed in the forest. Missing sheep, growls at dusk, eyes in the brush, and then tonight, a jaguar, a bleeding one, with a cub she couldn't save on her own. This is a story about instinct, silence, and a kind of trust no one ever sees coming. But that night, there was still one thing no one expected. Every morning, Jonas rose with the cicadas. He'd heat water on the rusted stovetop, pour it over cracked instant coffee, and step out to the porch to watch the dry winds play with the tumbleweeds. The ranger station hadn't seen duty in years, and the old radio tower beside it leaned like a drunk cowboy. But Jonas stayed, fixing things, avoiding questions. His mother used to say, "Some people don't get lost. They just finally find somewhere the world can't follow." Then came the tracks. Big ones, too big for coyotes, too clean for feral dogs. He saw them first behind the old barn. Days later, he found a lamb torn open near the fence line, half-eaten, eyes wide. The neighbors blamed mountain lions, but Jonas knew those pads weren't from any cougar. That night, he heard it, a low, guttural call cutting through the dusk like a tremor. Not close, not far either. He turned off the lamp and listened, heart pounding in the dark. The next morning, Clay Redford showed up, local rancher, big voice, big boots, short temper. "You seen what's been killing my sheep?" Clay asked, eyes squinting under the brim of his hat. "Tracks go right past your shed." Jonas shook his head. "No lions around here, not anymore." Clay sniffed. "Then what left claw marks on my water tank?" No answer. "Listen, I got men sweeping the ridge tomorrow. We see anything move that ain't a cow, we shoot first, ask never." As Clay drove off, Jonas stood alone in the dust, a thin film of dread settling over him. That evening, while repairing a busted CB radio, he felt it again, that pressure in the air, like a storm holding its breath. When he stepped out, the last light of day was leaking into the trees, and in the underbrush, just beyond the range of the porch bulb, something moved. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was watching. The silence didn't feel empty anymore, and something in the darkness blinked. Jonas had never asked for much, just quiet. After his mother passed, the world felt too loud, too fast, too cruel. He'd come to the old ranger station hoping to disappear into routine. Fixing broken things gave him purpose, but peace was fragile. One morning, while checking the windmill pump, he found buzzards circling over the dry creek bed. Something had died. He followed the smell down a narrow trail of flattened grass and found the remains of a goat, torn, gnawed, abandoned, not clean like a cougar kill. Messy, desperate. Wolves? Unlikely. And then he saw it, a single, massive paw print pressed deep into the mud, with curved claws visible at the tips. Jaguars didn't live here, not anymore. But this one did. That night, the ranch radios crackled with tension. Jonas listened from his cabin as Clay Redford and his men organized a hunt. "Boys say it's a jag," Clay barked over the radio. "Must have come up through the border. We trap it, we kill it, that's it." Jonas leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. Something inside him twisted, not fear, not pity, something else. Like the faint memory of a voice saying, "Not everything wild is your enemy." He slept in fits, gun resting beside his cot. Before dawn, he woke to the distant sound of dogs barking, then silence, then a cry. Not a human cry, not a full-grown roar either. Something younger, broken. By the time the sun cracked the sky, Jonas had already found the trail. Drops of blood, drag marks, disturbed leaves. It led downhill, then up again toward the far slope, thick with mesquite and cottonwood. He found her just past the ridge. She stood panting, sides heaving, one leg dragging uselessly behind her. Scars clawed down her flank, and one eye was nearly swollen shut. But it was the bundle in her jaws that made Jonas stop breathing. A cub, small, limp, legs dangling. She stared at him, unmoving. Then, slowly, she set the cub down on a bed of crushed grass. With a sound between a growl and a groan, she backed away, not fleeing, not attacking, just yielding. Jonas stood frozen. This was madness. She could kill him with one leap, but she hadn't. She was asking him, for help. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew about wild things fell apart. The cub was barely breathing. Jonas dropped to his knees, hands hovering just above the tiny body. The fur was soaked, sticky with river silt, and something darker. One paw twitched once, then nothing. Behind him, the mother jaguar stood, silent but trembling. Her ribcage expanded in slow, ragged pulls. She didn't growl, she didn't move. She just watched. Jonas whispered, "Jesus." He hadn't said that name out loud in years. His fingers brushed the cub's chest. No rhythm. He tilted the small head gently, water trickled from its nose. Then he did the only thing he could think of. 2 fingers over the heart. Compressions. Small, careful, desperate. 1, 2, 3, he counted under his breath. Behind him, the mother let out a low, guttural moan, not a threat, something closer to grief. The cub coughed. Jonas jerked back in shock, then leaned down again, turned its head, cleared the airway. More water, a gasp, then a tiny, gasping breath. It was alive, but only just. He wrapped it in his flannel overshirt and stood, heart hammering. The mother took one staggering step forward, then collapsed, just crumpled to the side, her body folding inward like paper soaked in rain. God, no, no, no. Jonas looked at the ridge above, too far to carry both. He made a choice. He lifted the cub and ran. Back at the station, he laid it near the wood stove, wrapped in an old wool blanket. It breathed in shallow, wet bursts. He heated water, found a syringe, filled it slowly, and let the cub taste the warm drops off his fingertip. Outside, the sun began to fall, and with it, something else. Jonas felt it before he saw it. Engines, lights, voices. He looked up from the porch and saw Clay Redford's truck crest the hill, flanked by 2 others, 3 men, all armed, all furious. Clay stepped out, rifle slung lazy over his shoulder. "You've been hiding it, haven't you?" Jonas didn't answer. "We saw the prints. We followed the blood. That bitch is still alive, ain't she?" "She's dying," Jonas said flatly. "She's not the threat here." Clay's eyes narrowed. "They always are, until they kill someone's kid." Jonas didn't flinch. "This one hasn't. You're just scared of what you don't understand. That did it." Clay raised the rifle, not to fire, but to aim. Just enough to send a message. "You're protecting a man-eater." Jonas stepped forward, the tiny cub still breathing behind him on a nest of towels and hope. "She trusted me," he said. "She brought her child to me. You think that's nothing? You think an animal like that does that out of accident?" "You've gone soft," Clay snapped. "You used to work with your hands. Now look at you, talking to animals." "I'm not talking," Jonas said. "I'm listening." Behind the trucks, dusk had fallen hard. But then, from the far ridge, came a low, long growl. Heads turned. She was there, bleeding, broken but upright, standing at the crest like a ghost in the dying light. Clay's men hesitated. "She ain't gonna last long," one muttered. "She don't need long," Jonas said, eyes locked on the Jaguar. That night, as they retreated, Jonas knew the peace he wanted was gone, replaced by something heavier, more urgent. And on the porch behind him, the cub finally let out a cry. Small, sharp, full of life, but the silence afterward, it felt like a warning. And you? Have you ever seen an animal place its trust in someone, not with words, but with silence? Sometimes it's in those quiet moments that we find out who we really are. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if that dying jaguar stopped at your door? At dawn, the cub stirred. Jonas had fallen asleep on the floor beside the stove, still in his boots, arms wrapped around himself like armor. The sound was faint. A scratch, a breath, the tiniest whimper. He sat up fast. The bundle of flannel shifted. Two golden eyes blinked at him, unfocused but alive. The cub stretched its legs with a soft groan and then did something Jonas didn't expect. It reached toward him. One tiny paw landed on his hand, claws retracted. He didn't move. Outside, a shadow passed by the window. Jonas stood, slowly, carefully. He stepped out onto the porch, and there she was, the mother jaguar. She had no right to be alive. Her wounds were open, raw, her breathing was shallow. But she stood tall, proud, like pain was just part of the ritual. She looked at Jonas, not like a predator, not like prey, like an equal. He stepped aside. She limped past him, slow and silent. When she reached the door, Jonas held his breath, not sure what instinct would rule her. But she didn't look at the tools, the metal, the walls. She looked at her cub. And the cub, sensing her scent, lifted its head and let out a sound Jonas had never heard before. Not quite a purr, not quite a mewl. Something in between, ancient and private. She responded with a low hum, soft and strange, as if saying, "You're still here. I found you." She didn't stay long, just long enough to lick the cub's face, her tongue moving with careful rhythm. Then she looked back at Jonas. Their eyes met. In that moment, neither of them blinked, and Jonas knew, she understood, she remembered. And she had come not only for the cub, but for the man who hadn't turned away. By midday, the ranger station no longer felt abandoned. The cub had eaten, a mixture of goat's milk and boiled egg Jonas had carefully prepared with trembling hands. It wasn't much, but it stayed down. Its breathing was stronger. The tremors had stopped. The mother hadn't returned. Jonas wasn't sure if she'd make it through another night. Still, he kept the porch door open, just in case. Around 2 o'clock, he climbed the old radio tower and powered the backup battery. He hadn't used the transmitter in months, maybe years. His voice cracked as it left his throat. "This is Whitaker Station. Requesting urgent assistance. Injured wildlife. Critical." He didn't say more. Didn't say what kind of wildlife. Didn't say he'd let a jaguar into his home. The sun was low again when the radio crackled. "This is Dr. Rachel Quinlan, New Mexico Wildlife Service. Coordinates received. ETA 6 hours by road, sooner by air. Do you have visual on the animal?" Jonas looked down at the cub curled in his shirt sleeve. "I have the cub. The mother's wounded. May not survive the night." There was a pause. "Copy that." Jonas exhaled slowly. He went back inside, placed the cub near the stove again, and packed a small bag. Gauze, antibiotics, water. He didn't know if he could find her again, but he had to try. But when he stepped outside, she was already there. At the edge of the trees, leaning against a trunk, breathing shallow, her eyes opened. She saw him. He crouched and extended the bag. No sudden moves. She didn't come closer. She didn't need to. For the first time, Jonas saw something in her face that made his throat tighten. Not fear, not pain, but peace, like she'd finally finished her part. And now it was his turn. The helicopters came at dawn, 2 of them, one from the Wildlife Service. The other wasn't. Jonas stepped onto the porch as red dust spiraled up from the dirt road. He recognized the sound of diesel trucks long before he saw them. Clay Redford. And he wasn't alone. 3 pickups, 6 men, all armed, all local. The Wildlife Service van arrived just seconds behind, too late to stop them, too early to escape. Dr. Rachel Quinlan stepped out first, clipboard in hand, her eyes sharp and unreadable. She didn't flinch when Clay approached. "We're taking that Jaguar," he growled. "It's dangerous. She's under federal protection," Rachel replied calmly, "and she's dying. You think that matters to the people who've lost livestock? You think the law protects us when our kids can't sleep at night?" Jonas stepped in then. "She's not hunting. She's surviving." Clay turned, furious. "You siding with animals now, Whitaker? I'm siding with what's right. Then you better be ready to bleed for it." Silence. Jonas glanced at the tree line. No movement. He knew what Clay didn't. The mother wasn't strong enough to run. She wasn't even strong enough to crawl. If they found her now, it'd be over. Inside, the cub let out a cry. Clay heard it. He moved toward the door. Jonas blocked him. Clay raised the rifle. "I don't want to do this," he said. Jonas didn't move. "You already are." Behind him, he heard the sound of boots. Rachel's team positioning themselves slowly, carefully, not to fight, to protect. Jonas stood taller. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was the line between destruction and survival. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying and beautiful. They still weren't safe. Not yet. The standoff couldn't hold. The cub cried again, louder this time, and the sound cut through the air like a knife. Clay's men flinched. One of them muttered, "It's just a baby." Clay raised a hand. "Doesn't matter. Where there's a cub, there's a killer." Jonas felt it before he saw it. A movement in the brush behind the trucks. A shadow shifting. Then a staggering step into the open. The mother Jaguar. She shouldn't have been able to stand, much less walk. But there she was, ribs visible, fur matted with dried blood, one eye nearly swollen shut. She didn't roar, she didn't growl, she just looked at Jonas. And then she did something no one expected. She walked straight toward him. The rifles lifted instantly. "Don't!" Jonas shouted, arms wide. Clay didn't listen. The rifle cracked. Once, the bullet hit the ground at the Jaguar's feet. She stumbled, let out a low cry, but didn't stop. She reached Jonah and collapsed against his legs. Every weapon froze. Jonas dropped to his knees, arms cradling her massive head. She was still breathing, barely. Her eyes fluttered open, then closed again, but her chest kept rising, and he could feel the faintest vibration in her throat. Not a purr, but a sound of recognition, of goodbye. The cub whimpered from inside the station. Dr. Quinlan stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "Let us move her now. If we don't, she dies here." Clay hesitated. "That animal, she came here," Jonas said, "because she knew this was the only place left where no one would shoot first." He looked around, not just at Clay, but at the other men, the younger ones, the ones who hadn't raised their rifles. "She didn't come for revenge. She came for help, Wushu." The silence that followed was like breath held under water. Then Clay muttered something under his breath, lowered his rifle, and turned away. "Whatever happens to that animal," he said, "ain't on me anymore." Rachel's team moved quickly. They wrapped the Jaguar's body in blankets, slid her onto a stretcher reinforced with aluminum rods, and lifted her into the truck. The cub cried until Jonas brought it close to her. It curled beside her side and went quiet. Jonas stood back watching the doors close, and as the truck pulled away, he saw her eyes open one last time, just for a second. They locked onto his. No fear, only something like gratitude, maybe even trust. The same trust she'd shown when she stepped out of the trees and laid her child at his feet. And now, in the dust rising behind the tires, the only thing left on the porch was a socket wrench and a single paw print, still fresh, already drying in the sun. Weeks passed. The station grew quiet again, but not in the same way. Jonas still fixed things, old generators, trail radios, even a broken weather sensor someone mailed in with no return address. But now, when he looked at the door each morning, he expected something more than wind. He visited the sanctuary twice. The first time, they let him watch from an observation deck. The cub, now stronger, leapt clumsily at fluttering leaves. Its coat had grown thick and golden. It never left its mother's side. She'd survived the surgery. Barely. A steel plate in her shoulder, dozens of sutures, one blind eye. But when Jonas stepped into view, she turned her head, just slightly, and he knew she remembered. The second visit, he brought something wrapped in canvas. His mother's old socket wrench, the one she'd used to fix school chairs at night so the janitor wouldn't be blamed when they broke. He handed it to the sanctuary staff. "For repairs," he said, "of any kind." Back at the station, he carved something into the old doorframe. Not words, just 3 small symbols, a wrench, a paw print, and a flame. He never spoke of what they meant, but every time he looked at them, he felt it again. The moment a dying creature chose him, and how, in saving her, he'd found something of himself buried under all the quiet. Because sometimes the things that save us don't speak, they just see us. Maybe you know someone like Jonas. Someone quiet. Someone the world forgot to ask about. And maybe, like him, they're just waiting, not for noise, but for a moment that finally makes them feel seen. If this story moved something in you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far the bond between humans and wild hearts can travel, and if you've ever witnessed an animal trust a human in a way that defied logic, share it below. Someone reading it might need that hope right now. And of course, if you'd like to keep hearing stories like this, ones that don't just entertain but feel, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. There are more wild truths waiting just beyond the trees. I'll be right here when you're ready to hear them.